Just up front, this video is not monetized, and if you really would like to pay tribute to the absolute legend that was Eddie Van Halen, I encourage you to donate to Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation down below, and I'll explain specifically why in this video. But before we get started, I just want to wish the best to all of Eddie's family, and to all of Eddie's friends, and to everyone who is inspired by Eddie Van Halen. This is a massive loss for music, for culture, for history. It's very profound. In my own personal experience, I would say Eddie Van Halen was a guitar player that, to an extent, I almost took for granted. Not that I did not acknowledge his greatness or his impact on music and how I'm able to do what I do because of his influence and because of his achievements, but more that he was a known quantity and he was in history and he was also still alive. Once you realize that he's gone and he's not going to be able to make any more music or play any more live shows, and you realize just how much of an impact and how important he was, not just from a cerebral aspect, but how many people were tied up in him emotionally. It's very heavy. I went ahead and threw on Van Halen 1 again and tried to listen to it like I had listened to it for the first time. And I still get chills every time he gets to the tappy bit in Eruption. Anyone who watches my channel most likely knows how much I love John Petrucci and Michael Ackerfeld, and both outstanding musicians in their own right, but they are not nearly as legendary and as important to the development of modern music as Eddie Van Halen is and was. To try and break it down as much as possible, because there is so much, I've kind of split this up into 2, maybe 3 sections. I haven't fully decided yet. I'm doing this a little bit off the cuff. The first thing he brought to music was innovation. When I say innovation, I don't mean just one aspect of rock and roll or of music. I mean like multiple different aspects. For anyone who may not be aware, this particular body shape of a guitar is referred to as a Stratocaster body. Back in the 70s, when you had a Stratocaster that was made by Fender, it would have what's called a single coil pickup, which is only one of these bars, essentially. And Gibsons, which look more like a traditional guitar, had what was called a PAF pickup, or what would become or is kind of a humbucker. It has 2 of these. Eddie, when he was chasing his sound and his tone, was the first one to buy a boogie body Stratocaster body, specifically boogie body. I only remember that because my friend Bill Franco makes sure I know every time, and put a humbucker in a Stratocaster and completely changed the guitar world. This right here, we think of as standard today, and he was the first one to come up with that idea. The idea obviously became so popular that we don't think about it twice today. In amplification, he wanted to chase the tone of Eric Clapton and quote, "the gods." So he ordered the amps that they used. I forget which one it was specifically, but it was a 220 volt amp. And in the UK, that works. In American electricity system, that didn't work. He turned on the amp and pushed it the whole way, maximized it out, but he was barely getting any volume out of it because it wasn't getting enough voltage. So he found himself a Variac light dimmer, basically a variable voltage transformer type of thing. And he used that to control the volume of the amp while still having this fully saturated sound. People wondered for years how he got that tone, to the point now where, one, it was the sound that defined the 80s as far as rock and roll and metal goes, but it's the basis for which all of our modern hard rock and metal tone basically comes from. His innovation in guitar playing, first of all, the very obvious one, his 2-hand Correct, he was not the first one to utilize that. I believe he said Jimmy Page, and there were a few other guitar players. I even seen a ukulele player from back in the 20s who was doing a technique similar to that. But nobody did it with the same phrasing that he did, and absolutely not with the same tone. That tone saturated the guitar so much that with a light touch, well, relatively light touch, it screamed a full note. Like I said, even that tapping section at the end of Eruption still gives me chills to this day, just because of how raw, intense, triumphant it is. And it speaks to another innovation of his phrasing and articulation, which just was not done before, a true virtuoso on the instrument. Even people who spend decades of their lives trying to copy and master Eddie Van Halen are not Eddie Van Halen. And his often overlooked rhythm playing innovation. Listening to anything in 1978 and prior to Van Halen 1, you're not going to hear anything like that at all. And the dive bombs in Eruption as well, people had their minds absolutely blown. Like, how is he doing this? How is the guitar staying in tune? And that made him instrumental in the creation of the Floyd Rose tremolo locking tremolo system, pardon me. This is technically not a Floyd Rose, but it's essentially the same design. You have this, it floats from both ends. There are springs back here, and you can pull it way up and you can push it way down. And you have these locks here on the nuts that prevent the guitar from going way out of tune. Again, Eddie was instrumental in yet another piece of guitar and instrument technology that we find commonplace and normal today. It was new and exciting and innovative. And I guess part 2 of this would be inspiration. In 1978, when people heard the Van Halen record explode through their speakers, it was mind-blowing, jaw-dropping, and just, holy crap, I have no idea what he's doing or how he's getting this sound. How is he doing this? It engages the imagination. It excites you to try and chase after it, not knowing how to get there. Guitar players still to this day nerd out over pictures and diagrams and interviews on the gear setup for Eddie Van Halen through all of his records. It was that powerful in their lives. The Van Halen record was so inspirational and groundbreaking that all of the other hair shredders in that whole generation were copying Eddie to a certain degree or another. In that sense, you can say that Eddie Van Halen is the grandfather or the godfather of modern shred guitar and modern metal shredding. All of the YouTubers that you love, all of the guitar heroes that you love, that you go and see at shows or watch their YouTube channels or just happen to listen to their music, whatever, we wouldn't be here without Eddie. As much as I can still side on the argument that Jimi Hendrix is technically the greatest guitar player of all time because of so many different factors, the same thing can be said about Eddie Van Halen. It's a really tough argument to have. And I'm not trying to make an argument right now. I'm just saying that's the level to which Eddie Van Halen was so important. And I guess to wind this up, another reason why Eddie Van Halen was so inspirational is because he grew up very poor. He didn't innovate because he was a genius. I'm not saying whether he was or not. I don't know. He innovated because he wanted something. He wanted to have this sound. He wanted to be amazing at guitar. He loved it. And he didn't let anything get in his way, even the trials of growing up in a really poor family. That necessitated that he get creative and he get experimental and he have to try things out, which is where we got the Super Strat, which is where we got modern day Brown sound amps, which is where we have the Floyd Rose, most likely where we have a two-handed tapping technique. He is an inspiration that if you really want it bad enough, you can go achieve it. he did. He is was a freaking legend. And this brings me back to the beginning of the video, why I'm telling everyone in order to pay tribute and carry on Eddie's legacy in the best way possible, please go donate to the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation in the link below. This was a charity that was very close to Eddie because it provides instruments to students who can't afford it. And at one time, he was that kid. We don't know what opportunities are lost when someone can't afford to try something and possibly cultivate a passion, whether that be maths and sciences or whether that be the arts like music. So again, my heart goes out to everyone affected by the loss of Eddie Van Halen. And please donate in the link down below. I honestly believe that's what he would have liked. And I'll see you guys in the next video.